Hey everyone, so the new 50 Shades of Grey movie is out at the moment, which is an interesting film, but not that I watch them. But anyway, Dakota Johnson's chart is what I'm going to do today. She plays Anastasia Steele in the movies, and I just thought it'd be interesting to see how she compares to her character, you know, what we can get from her personality from looking at her natal chart. So she's got a Capricorn rising, and the rising sign, as I've explained before, it's sort of our personality when we first meet people. It's a bit of a front, it's how we like to project ourselves into the world. You can also sort of see it as the front door to our home. For a Capricorn, I sort of imagine like a black painted oak, you know, sort of sturdy, strong, with a big padlock on it kind of door, because they have that sort of reserve and that tough exterior. And then you can think of it as, you know, once you get past someone's front door, you know, behind that you get into the first house, where it's like the entrance hall when you first come into the house. It's like, you know, what the person is conscious of. This is how they would like to present themselves. People like to make the front of their house look nice because that's what you present. And then, you know, the fifth house could be like the rumpus room or the playroom, and then this is what talking about 50 Shades does, oh dear. And then, you know, the eighth house being like the bedroom, you know, anything private. Same with the fourth house, a place where we feel really comfortable in our home. So it's just, you know, it's a way of looking at the chart, the different areas of how we display ourselves and how we are in the different areas of our life. So Capricorn's actually the exalted rising sign, because the first house being ruled by Mars, and Capricorn is exalted in Mars. So it being there on the first house cusp, it's a good expression to have for your physical appearance and how you project yourself. It's a cardinal sign again, so they're the leaders, they get stuff done. You know, you want that to go and protect yourself into the world because it's a good quality to have. Capricorn risings can also sort of come across as quite serious, very cautious, they don't let people in easily. Quite feminine and delicate, like the Virgo, because being an earth sign, they're a feminine sign, but also at the same time very sturdy and robust, because they are such tough workers and resilient. They're very organised and persistent. They'll keep on working, keep on doing what they need to do to get things done or to get to their goal. Very diligent and capable. They can be quite sort of conservative and reserved, and also they have, because it's their rising sign, it's their body, they look sort of very mature, and they can look more mature when they're younger, and then younger when they look older. It's kind of a bit of a blessing. That's why it's an exalted rising. So Capricorn is Kronos in the Greek mythology, you know, old father time. The symbol of Saturn actually is the sickle that he carries, because he's considered a patron of the harvest and, you know, the natural cycles of life. Capricorn's like Aquarius actually. They can have that sort of dry, sarcastic sense of humour, actually, which I think she has. They also give off an impression that they demand a sort of certain level of respect. They're also sort of known to have a serious and quite intense sort of gaze, which will actually be strengthened for her because she's got the Scorpio Venus as well. But even if they have a light-hearted sort of personality like a Libra sun, which she has, so they will still have that. They can even appear sort of cold and distant in a way, keeping people at arm's length. I think sort of with a Libra sun as well, that can come across, because Libra's interactions can sometimes be more superficial and, you know, just pleasant on the surface. So especially the men with a Capricorn rising have really sort of those chiseled jaw, cheekbones, Capricorn ruling the bones, the skin, the knees as well. I think Dakota has this to a degree, but I think also her Libra sun sort of softens her facial features a little bit more than a typical Capricorn rising, and also a well-proportioned sort of body and facial features as well. Because Capricorn rules the bones and also the teeth, like I said, there can be something that stands out about their teeth, whether they have a gap tooth or there's just something, or they have just perfect teeth, you know, something about their teeth also I think Capricorn risings can have. For some reason there is something about Dakota's smile and her teeth that are not really unusual, but there is something about them. I think, you know, you notice her smile. They also really care about their social status and like to be, you know, always really busy and productive. I think how we dress and how we come across and how we look is, you know, a lot to do with our rising signs and planets in the first house or close to the ascendant, but I also think that it's a heavy dose of genetics and epigenetics, our upbringing, along with free will. I think it's important to remember that we have our natal charts as a sort of blueprint for our psychological, biological sort of nature, but we still have free will and we can choose how we express our personalities. I think we're learning to express the best possible version of what we've been given. So she's got her North Node in Aquarius there, also in her first house. So I think this would be a journey for her for sort of self-discovery and what motivates her and drives her. You know, being in the first house, this is what drives you. And how she sort of fits in with the masses and the collective, you know, being in the sign of Aquarius, the groups and the collective and the public. With the South Node there in Leo, it would sort of be about sort of struggles to do with her own personal needs, which is Leo, you know, looking after yourself, your ego, and also learning about your dedication to other people and being of service to others, and the group again, which is Aquarius. So always with the South Node and North Node, we're trying to integrate what we learnt from the South Node qualities and using that to sort of propel ourselves into the house and sign where our North Node is to evolve our character. You know, in Leo, she's sort of done the whole being self-involved, being praised, being in the spotlight, being a performer, being recognised and really proud. And so using the positive traits of this Leo, being really warm, open, playful and friendly, having a really creative attitude, especially with her work, and incorporating them and becoming more sort of factual and outspoken and rational and more of a visionary maybe for the people, and also serving the collective in some way, maybe even being a role model. You know, she is in the spotlight there. It's an important thing to carry and to inspire people in a positive way. I'll touch on Taurus in the 4th house just real quickly. It basically just means, you know, home for her is somewhere where she can be a recluse and lazy and indulgent, you know, all the Taurus qualities, she can be that at home, which is lovely, really. There's no planets there. There's not a lot going on in the bottom of her chart. So we'll move on to the 6th house. I'm not going to go into too much depth with the Ceres and the Chiron again. I just will touch on it lightly because they're very in-depth asteroids. They're a lot to do with loss and pain and past hurts and things we really need to work on in this life to unburden ourselves in a way. So Ceres is to do with loss and nurture and females, and in the sign of Cancer it strengthens that. So it could be to do something with the mother. Cancer usually represents the mother, or just females in general, or the connection with her femininity, with herself. There's something going on there, especially with Chiron being there as well. There is something sort of maybe painful for her to do with family. It's squaring the sun, you know. The sun can represent the father. It's conjunct her descendant there, which is to do with your relationships. So it could mean she's quite intuitive and caring, you know, when it comes to relationships, and also caring for her loved ones. So Cancer is very sensitive. It's very deep and emotional. Chiron being there in the descendant, it's a very sort of prominent place in the chart, and the Chiron archetype is something she'll have to look at in her own life to help her with any sort of pain or discomfort she has in her life. It could be to do with relationships, again being on the descendant there. But on a more positive note, she has Jupiter in Cancer, which is exalted in Cancer. It's a good, strong, benefic planet in its exalted sign, so it makes it, you know, even luckier, even more abundant. This is all what Jupiter is about. If you have sort of a strong Venus or a strong Jupiter, which means you've got good aspects, either exalted or by house or by sign, you know, it generally means sort of luck, wealth, abundance, happiness in that area of your life. Could be likely, you know, even things to do with money if it was Venus. But with Jupiter, I mean, there's a difference between wealth and riches. Jupiter's also where we want to find meaning in our life. So in the 6th house, I think she would need to find meaning in her everyday life, what she does day to day. In Cancer, it could be about sort of giving love and nurturing people. It's also in the house of service, the 6th house. So, you know, this could also mean it has a bit of an idealistic quality as well. There's quite a few aspects and a lot of attention going to the 6th house, and the 6th house also rules your health. So I think there would be sort of a lot of attention needed on her health, and having a sort of good diet and fitness regime can help with any sort of emotional pain. And it's also the house of work. So, you know, you need to be healthy to be able to work and to do the things you want to do every day. So if her daily life isn't organised, you know, which is very Virgoan, you know, it could sort of affect her very emotionally, which is all that Cancer placement in the 6th house. And she's got Jupiter in opposition to Saturn, and so there could be sort of a push and pull between enthusiasm and restriction. She needs to kind of use both of the positive traits of these energies to use them in the best possible way. Saturn's actually quite important in her chart because it is her chart ruler. So it is about finding that balance for her, I think, in her life, because Saturn's all about hard work, dedication and long-term success, and Jupiter's all about the here and now and having a good time, so she will need to, again, balance that. So with the descender being in Cancer, I mean, a Capricorn rising, on the exterior she could project this sort of cold, reserved character, but actually on the inside, you know, the descender is how we are on the inside when we get into a relationship with someone, how we really are. So Cancer being there, it's usually the opposite to it's the opposite from Capricorn. It's very soft and nurturing and loving and maternal. She probably doesn't like people too much with these traits, the negative of Cancer, which are a bit clingy, over emotional, moody, defensive or undisciplined, though she can possibly be these things in a relationship, especially with a Scorpio Venus. Scorpio can get quite attached and quite possessive actually in relationships as well. There's sort of a fine balance between loving someone and wanting to protect them and being, you know, overly protective and loving and smothering almost. The water signs are very deeply intelligent emotionally. She will have a really deep understanding of how relationships work and the sensitivity that happens within them. It'll be interesting to see how this sort of plays out in her life actually. But she would be drawn to relationships that are very loving and sensitive and giving. I'm going to move on to the 8th house now, because she's got her Mercury there in Virgo. Mercury is how we communicate, how we speak, how we think, how we perceive different situations. Mercury in Virgo can be very observant and have a very analytical mind. These traits are very strengthened as well because it being in the 8th house, which is a Scorpio tendency as well. She would love sort of deep and detailed knowledge when having a conversation with someone or learning about something. Mercury also rules sort of lower education and learning things. This is actually a great placement to have for sort of delving into any subject of interest for her, you know, any sort of matters for work, for research even. Virgo can also be very critical and judgmental and, you know, have very high standards for themselves and other people. They aim for perfection, really. They're also very precise and don't like people that ramble on too much or say meaningless and unrelated things, you know, when communicating. She might prefer to sort of have really detailed and unambiguous scripts for her roles. So you can kind of see it when she speaks. When she speaks, it's quite sort of meek and soft and feminine, which is very Virgo. You know, Virgo being a mutable, you know, very amenable sign. But the 8th house is all about sex, death, taboo, the occult. So with Mercury being there, I think she would be quite comfortable sort of talking about these subjects, you know, in interviews and things, and to do it as a role, you know. Even Virgo being a very modest sign as well. She actually told one magazine that when describing, you know, being tied up and all of that, it's quite beautiful and very intricate, the way that the knots are tied and the variety of the knots and tools and rope. The details matter so much, and there are rules and manners and etiquette that goes with the whole world of it. So she understands the detail of it and the preciseness, and how it's not just something that, you know, it's something to be respected as well. This Mercury in Virgo in the 8th house, it really is quite fitting for this role. I know it's just one role and she's played lots of different roles, but it's just so fitting for this, and the fact that she's really known for this more than any other roles that she has played. So this Mercury is also making a quincunx and connecting to her North Node in Aquarius, so it'd also be fitting to say that she has gained a lot of sort of public recognition from the collective from doing this. Though I don't know how comfortable she is about being recognised for it, talking about it maybe, but because a quincunx there is sort of a more uncomfortable aspect. Mercury is also making a nice sextile to Venus in Scorpio, so this would sort of support this as well, Scorpio ruling the 8th house, and also, you know, using her words to sort of seduce and attract people to her. So the 8th house gives this Mercury a bit more command and determination of her own mind than a typical Virgo Mercury. Also a depth and a suspiciousness to how they view things. So now we've got Mars and Libra again. We had this in the previous video. So again, these are not very directly confrontational Mars placements. If the Libra and Mars had a problem, it would rather sort of talk about it later with friends or another person, rather than directly addressing someone in, you know, a non-gracious way. They would have to do it in a very polite way if they were to do it. So our Mars sign is how we act to protect ourselves when we feel threatened. This is sort of embedded in us from a very young age, because when we feel threatened, it's usually because of our ego feels threatened. That's our sun sign. or our emotions, which would be our moon sign. So you have to look at these two planets and their signs to see how or when we would get upset, and then the Mars sign is how you act when it gets triggered. Libra would want to be, you know, the mediator in an argument, just wanting everyone to sort of get along and socialise in a very friendly way, making sure there's order and everything's fair in the environment as well. She would also use her energy for anything to do with higher learning, education, travelling, searching for the big picture in life, you know, which is everything to do with the 9th house. Mars is also our assertion, our anger, our aggression. So Mars is ruled by Aries, which is the god of war, and, you know, he wants to conquer and win and doesn't want to back down, that is kind of relentless in a way in whatever quest it's on. So in the sign of Libra, it can mean that her relationships sort of have these struggles in some way, Libra ruling relationships. Mars is also squaring Cancer by sign, ruling her 7th house of relationships. So her Mars and Sun, which can also represent the father or a male figure in her life, are the biggest sort of hurdles and lessons in life for her. Being central right at the top of the chart there, there's squares going to the Cancer placements down there before the 7th house, and then also in the 12th house the Saturn, and then all of those oppositions going from the 12th and 6th house. It is quite difficult for her, and she needs to learn about these more masculine traits within herself. She could also be quite passionate about a certain belief system as well, being the 9th house. So Mars conjunct the Sun. Mars likes to win and the Sun wants to shine. So this can emphasize in the sphere of life of learning and education and philosophy and foreign affairs. She's also got Mars square Jupiter, which is not the most disciplined sort of aspect, but it may be a positive and sort of more adventurous, you know, energy to her personality, and make her a bit more confident in a way as well, because there is a lot of Capricorn emphasis in her chart. Also Jupiter being in the 6th house of Virgo, Virgo likes to run a tight ship, so, you know, I don't know how outrageous that square might be, but it is a tight orb. I think maybe it would come out in flashes, you know, being both fiery planets, it could come out in flashes, and a square is sort of where we have a lesson to learn there, so maybe life will sort of bring about situations where she'll have to learn about this aspect within herself. Even psychologists are really recognising, you know, how the subconscious creates situations around us in our life to help sort of resolve inner conflicts within our own psyche. So she's got Sun in Libra, and the Sun is our ego, it's our temperament, our conscious mind, the Moon being our unconscious mind. Libras are very polite, they like moderation and balance in all things, especially in relationships, but with the Sun semi-square Venus in Scorpio, which can be quite domineering in relationships, so this could be a tough area of her life to have a balance in. On top of that, Mars is conjunct her Sun in Libra, and Mars again is not afraid of a fight or confrontation either, and will give her Sun a bit more energy of assertion and aggression than a typical Libran. She may even have trouble sort of containing or diverting her anger, which Libras sort of do. They sort of deflect it in different directions. Or again, maybe there's some sort of excessive behaviour or intense energy that comes out every now and then. Jupiter sort of expands anything it touches as well, so being in contact with the Mars in Libra, it could be in relationships. Both the Sun and the Mars are in their full and detriment in the sign of Libra, so they're not the best expressed version. With the Sun and Mars sort of squaring Jupiter, squaring Saturn, you know, having all these aspects going to her Sun, which rules Leo, I think this would sort of emphasise her South Node there and learning these lessons of how to best express her ego as well. She's shining when she's looking at the big picture in life and being optimistic and having faith in life and learning and travelling and connecting with different types of people, and also taking initiative, being at conjunct Mars. So now we go to her Scorpio MC, which is the midheaven, represents midday, the top of the chart, where it's like our public persona. It's also what we're aspiring to be, and, you know, a vocation in life where, because it's also ruling our career and how people know us. So in Scorpio, it can be described as sort of very mysterious, secretive, obsessive, passionate, very blunt, also regenerative, cathartic even, ruthless, observant, sexual, and also lustful. So Scorpio really wants power and control, especially with Pluto being there in the 10th, but not necessarily the spotlight. So again, the MC also being what we aspire to be, and Pluto being there ruling Scorpio, she wants to sort of be a powerful and magnetic respected person also, because her rising there is in Capricorn. They want to be respected and be the best at whatever they do as well. So Pluto being there, she would use these Scorpio sort of traits in her work and do well in Scorpio type roles. It's very fitting when she's playing Anastasia Steele, because she's very seductive and also very stubborn, because Scorpio is a fixed sign, so they can be very stubborn. And it's also fitting with being seen in the public eye as being sort of sexual or intimate by the public. So Venus is our womanly ways, how we attract people to us. In a man's chart it's a little bit different. It's the Venus one is usually by house and placement, what kind of woman they're attracted to. But for women, it's how we attract people to us. It's also what style we like, everything from music to our artistic pursuits, marriage as well. We're ruling the 7th house of marriage and just relationships in general. So Dakota has sort of mentioned that she likes wearing black, which is very fitting for Scorpio, because, you know, it sort of accentuates the curves and the sexiness of the appearance, and it's also, you know, a bit secretive being black. It's a bit hidden, covert and mysterious. So also adding a bit of suspicion there as well. You know, black is it's a very sort of strong, sexy and classic sort of colour. So the Scorpio archetype can also be described as insightful, very suspicious, compulsive, deep and complex character, very loyal, resistant and strong. A very mature Scorpio is sort of less harsh and blunt and more sort of logical and strong in their arguments, but an underdeveloped Scorpio can be, you know, they can lash out a bit more and, you know, be quite vindictive or destructive or self-destructive in that way. They did a horrible experiment where they put an actual scorpion in a glass jar, and because it couldn't get out, it would sting itself to death. That's the Scorpio archetype. It would rather sting itself to death than be defeated. So there's a few different ways that this can actually play out in relationships, and people with this aspect do have to be careful, because Venus is in its full in its sign of Scorpio. So it is a bit more difficult in relationships. Again, emphasising that for her, I think relationships is a big part of her life to sort of look at. Her Venus there is actually also semi-squaring Mars. You know, Mars can be very angry and lash out as well, so it's also the co-ruler of Scorpio. So kind of being careful not to act this out, or maybe she has a problem with assertion. The Sun and Mars both being in Libra, I mean, maybe that is a problem with assertion as well. But that aspect between Mars and Venus is also a very sexy and passionate aspect. It'll emphasise this for her. So again, Scorpio isn't that good for Venus. Scorpio is a bit too sultry and passionate and obsessive for sort of gentle, loving Venus. So putting the planet Venus of love with the planet Pluto, which is rules Scorpio, which is the planet of death, desire and transformation, it can give a sort of very intense love nature for sure. This could manifest in a lot of different ways, maybe having an intense need to be in a relationship with someone, having a deep sort of connection with someone, or be in control in relationship maybe. Which is a good thing actually, you know, if you have a partner that loves intensity and that deep connection, you know, you're in a relationship as well. If you find someone like that, it could be compatible. But some people it could be too much and overpowering for them. So without this sort of intense quality in her relationships or even her friendships, you know, she could feel maybe a sense of lack and need to find it somewhere. So unlike maybe a Gemini Venus who wants to have a connection with lots of different people, Scorpio wants to find the one person to have the deepest connection with, to also share the deepest part of themselves with. Because deep down they are vulnerable, they're a water sign, they're very emotional and receptive, hence the sort of protective nature. I've talked about her Venus for so long because it is squaring both her North Node and South Node, and it is very important for her on her evolutionary path, quite an important aspect for her relationships in general. It could be one specific relationship for her, I'm not sure of her past, but something there needs to be sort of resolved for her to feel comfortable and also loved, and how to grow as a person as well. In the sign of Scorpio, I think she would need to totally get rid of any sort of manipulating, dramatic Scorpio traits, dramatic also being Leo, the South Node, you know, to evolve and mature in her life, and especially with her public life because Scorpio ruling the MC there. So Venus in the 10th house ruled naturally by Capricorn, it gives her a more Capricorn sort of earthy, practical nature to the Scorpio Venus. Both Scorpio and Capricorn sort of archetypes can be very suspicious and protective and keep their guard up until you sort of get to know them and you've passed all their psychological sort of tests, or you're at least, you know, you prove yourself in some way. So using her attractiveness, her Venus sign in Scorpio, her magnetic sort of draw that she has on people, you know, using that in her public and career life, being in the 10th house. Venus is actually a really good place to have in the 10th house because it makes you want to sort of have and create a sort of need for harmony around you and in good relationships with people, and also connections, you know, in that area of your life. So we'll go to the moon in Sag and moon in Sagittarius in the 11th house. So the moon is our emotional nature, how we are growing up, how we see our mother, our maternal instincts, our more feminine side. A moon in Sag person just loves to live life, basically. They have a sort of nomadic quality about them. When these people are happy, you sort of notice it as a zest for life, sort of, and an enthusiasm for things. Unlike a sort of Capricorn moon, you can't really tell when the Capricorn moon are happy. They don't sort of overemphasize anything, but that's usually because, you know, Capricorn wants to stay in control. But with a Sagittarius moon, they're very expressive, very enthusiastic. So for Dakota, a need potentially for comfort and security comes in the form of traveling and adventure, and also learning things. Sagittarius' highest expression is actually very jovial and optimistic and moral and wise and encouraging, but on the negative side they can be very opinionated, very blunt, careless, and sort of run away from things when they don't feel comfortable, which is usually in a situation where they don't know how to deal with something or they feel oppressed in the sense of freedom or autonomy. The mutable quality of Sagittarius can make them very open to other people's points of view. This can also be why they're considered to be very worldly and good conversationalists. They could get upset, I think, if someone were to question their morality or their philosophy, as these two things are very important for a Sagittarius. They could also get upset if someone's being too narrow-minded or judgmental. When upset, they could like to go for a run, maybe being a fire sign. The only other thing sort of indicative of, you know, liking physical activity would be Mars in the 9th house, which is a fire house, but they're in Libra, you know, maybe less so. Libra doesn't really like to get dirty or sweaty, and at least they want to look good while doing it. Maybe when she's upset she could just like to go do something adventurous or fun. The temper, like all fire signs, could sort of come and go very quickly. There's also actually a mutual reception here between the moon in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Cancer. So the moon in the 11th house actually gives her more of an intellectual quality, where in her life her emotions are expressed due to Aquarius, which are scripts, which are thoughts and ideas. Earlier in life it could have just manifested in the way of being comfortable with sharing her emotions with her groups of people or her friends. Her emotions in this house are definitely on show for the public, using her emotions for work and also connecting with audiences being the 11th house. It also could be an emotional need to be sort of surrounded by supportive people and to connect with them. People with this moon, especially in such an outgoing sort of fire sign, she could feel very safe and comfortable in big groups of people and being in front of a large audience or group of people. This would be very useful being an actress. So Uranus there in the 12th, anything in the 12th is a bit more hidden. It's not a public house at all. It's our subconscious actually. It's barely known to ourselves. So it's a very deep and sort of hard to grasp the concept of these planets. So I'll just go over them very quickly. Basically Uranus there is hidden in a way. Uranus is about her own quirkiness, her rebelliousness, and also her own uniqueness. Uranus is also what we sort of rebel against, and being in the sign of Capricorn, which rules governments, laws, structures, society, you kind of see this effect in a generational level, because these three planets here, they're generational planets. Also Pluto, they're so far out in our solar system, they have such a slow orb that they affect people on a generational level rather than a personal level, and the personal planets being the faster moving ones, the moon, the sun, Mercury. So again, with the rebelliousness against structure, we sort of started to see this around 1988 when Uranus first went into Capricorn, with all the uprisings all over the world, in Turkey, China, New Caledonia, Burma, and of course the fall of the Berlin Wall, which actually happened in 1989, but the uprisings or sort of rebelliousness that actually started in 1988. Walls are a very Capricorn thing, by the way. She's also got Saturn there. Saturn's considered a more malefic sort of planet, representing sort of fears, restriction, lessons that we need to learn, boundaries, and it's not so well placed in the 12th house there, of Neptune, which is like no boundaries, the unconscious, spirituality, and also isolation. So there may be an issue with boundaries and limitations for her in some form. It may even mean that she works best, Saturn also representing work in the 10th house, when alone and needs that space to sort of think and daydream. Conjunct Neptune there, she will need that time to have for herself. A Scorpio MC would also like privacy when working as well. So Neptune's actually quite widely conjunct the ascendant there. Any planet sort of around the ascendant can really affect the way that they come across to people. Even though it's quite a wide degree of 8-degree orb, it may sort of help soften any harshness that Capricorn ascendant may have. Okay, so leave a like or comment and I'll see you soon.